All right, we should be live. Let's see if we get some people in the room here. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, Justin and I are going to wait about 1 to 2 minutes before we get started. So we're giving some time for people to join the room, and then we'll get started. 1 to 2 minutes, and we'll start doing some introductions. Justin, while we wait, how's your day going?
Pretty good, and yours?
It's good. It's good. So we just had a newborn, and she's 3 weeks old, but she's still trying to figure out the sleep cycle and what what's day and what's night. So my best laid plans of waking up early today and doing some yard work, getting a workout in, were quickly dashed as I spent most of the night holding Cameron. But it was good. It was good father-daughter time. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. To everybody who's joining, thank you for joining. Justin and I are just giving it a couple more minutes to let a couple more people join, and then we'll be able to start and do some introductions. So thank you for joining. Bear with us while we give a couple more people maybe 1 or 2 more minutes to join, and we'll get started.
Also, just thought maybe let you guys know, people that are already in here, I'm really excited to have any questions. So if you like anytime, you can write them, and we will receive the questions, and we'll keep some time at the end, and you can also ask them at the end, of course. But it's like what I'm most excited about is to hear what you guys want to know.
I agree, and very well said, Justin. Yes, please feel free to type your questions into the chat, and we will we'll be able to address them throughout, and at the end, we'll save some time. Justin, looks like you have some fans in the audience. That's very nice. Appreciate the kind words there, Marco.
Yeah. Hey, Marco.
All right. I think we've done a good job of waiting long enough. We have a good number of people in the room, so we can get started. I think introductions make a good sense for a place to start. So, Justin, if you don't mind, would love to hear about who you are, where you come from, what you've done to get yourself to where you are today in your career as a statistician.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Justin. So I live in Montreal right now, in Canada, and I come from a small town close to Ottawa, which is the capital of Canada, about 2-hour drive from Montreal. But I've been here for a while now. So I actually came here for school, and I started my, I guess, academic career, if we want, undergraduate, so bachelor's in math and stats. And at that time, I was kind of like unsure about what to do. I remember my dad kept telling me, "Hey, you should become a stats consultant. You can work from anywhere in the world. I know somebody who does it, blah, blah, blah." And I didn't really like, it kind of like stayed in my mind, but I didn't really do much of it. Towards the end, I kind of started taking more stats classes because I kind of figured, oh, maybe I'll do a master's. And I missed the deadline. I don't know. I wasn't as organized back then as today. Um, and I went to work in industry. I did a lot of like, I worked for an insurance company. So I did a lot of like stats modeling, but more like insurance. So actuarial science a bit more. And then didn't like the experience that much. So I went back to school for more graduate studies, and kind of had in the back of my mind, maybe I'll go have an academic career. And I started lecturing in math and stats. So I kind of like really loved that experience. And I didn't end up following an academic career, but I kind of had a lucky encounter with the biologist who I actually met playing basketball. So we became good friends, and she was working on her PhD, and I kind of started helping her. Then I met with her lab, and then from there I kind of realized like, hey, I have the skills to do this. So I kind of started helping scientists, mostly biologists, with their stats, help them with publications and stuff. And time went by so fast, and now I kind of have like a full consulting business that keeps me really busy. So that's pretty much it. So what about yourself, Bobby?
That's awesome. No, thanks for sharing. Yeah, the serendipity of your story is incredible, right? The chance encounter and then recognizing your skill set and being able to put that to good use to help further other people's research. Brilliant. Love that. That's
Exactly.
absolutely the dream scenario that you've lived through. Brilliant.
Yeah, really.
Mine's a little bit more direct to industry. So I went to undergrad to be a teacher. Love math. I think that math is a core principle that everyone should understand, at least to some degree. So I was pretty hell-bent on being a teacher. Unfortunately, recognized that the sheer volume of student loan debt that I had taken on probably wouldn't make for a good balance with a teaching career. So my goal is to get back to teaching full-time. But in the meantime, I got my master's degree in biostatistics, and I've been working in the industry for the past 15 years as a biostatistician within the life sciences industry. So I've kind of done a balance of both worlds in terms of contract research organization, where I work with a large variety of sponsors. And I've also served on the sponsor side, where I work for one company and work on their specific projects. Currently, today, I sit as the Vice President of Biostatistics and Statistical Programming for a company called ProPharma. We are a mid-size RCO research consulting organization, and we focus, my team focuses on helping our clients design and execute clinical programs. So really, we are kind of thought of as the, not necessarily masterminds, that's maybe a little bit too much credit, but certainly providing critical input into how big should the sample size be? What type of statistical tests should we use in order to make these claims that these new drugs and devices, or help the FDA make claims that these new devices and drugs are safe and effective? And I've been doing this with ProPharma for the past 5 years. And just very recently, the start of this year, I started my own free website called Better Biostatistics. And it's aimed at providing a lot of free material for statistical programmers and biostatisticians who are just getting started in their careers or who want to just continue to grow their careers. And I provide guidances and kind of case studies, webinar recordings, all talking about the soft skills you need to grow your career, or how to interpret FDA guidances when they come out, or best practices when reviewing statistical analysis plans, things like that. So I'm starting to get back to my educational roots through Better Biostatistics. And this webinar that, again, thank you, Justin, for taking the time to join me today, is part of, right? The goal of today is for Justin and I to share what we believe is a critical piece of starting and growing your career as a statistician. And that's that balance between really strong technical skills, knowing what statistical tests to use, knowing how to calculate sample sizes, but then also the soft skills, knowing how to listen to the customer, listen to your client, understanding the big picture, and kind of putting together the steps necessary to achieve that through those technical skills. So with that in mind, Justin, I think the thought process that I have with Better Biostatistics, I know we were speaking about this a little bit earlier, I think you have something very similar, if not even bigger, even grander on the horizon. If you'd love to share that with us, would love to hear that more about that from you, Justin, before we dive in.
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. So exactly, like it was kind of funny when I saw you come out with your Better Biostats, because I'm, like you said, I'm working on something similar. We had already like spoken quickly on LinkedIn, but so when I saw that, we kind of like started talking about it. So basically, I'm working on the new website. It's www.biostatistics.ca. And the mission here is to serve as sort of an information hub. So if you guys can go check it out, I worked on it really hard. There's already some content, and I plan on making more. And it's really aimed at helping people navigate the industry, navigating early career educational requirements, And I'm also going to use it as a place to share some technical tutorials and stuff like that. That's a bit too long for LinkedIn, right? So I've already done a blog post. It's about like handling influential observations in R. So basically, it's pretty short. It explains with some code and some visuals. So it's really hands-on, and I think you guys will like it. And also, I wanted to add that I'll be looking for some writers to help me with content. So I've already got my first one. So Bobby's already agreed to write something on the platform, and I think it's a really good place if people are interested in growing their personal brand online. We can find some sort of arrangement, but it would definitely include a picture, a bio, um, and you guys can write either technical stats stuff if you're interested in sharing some tips or tutorials. I'm also interested in career testimonials, maybe some case studies or projects that you worked on. So whatever, just reach out on LinkedIn. And again, it's biostatistics.ca. If you want to work with me on this project, I think it's going to be great. So just reach out, and I'm interested to see what you guys think about it.
Awesome. Congratulations, Justin. That's great. I know that's a long time coming. That's a lot of work that goes into that. So very excited to see the material you put out and how helpful it's going to be for the larger statistical community. Thank you for sharing, and congratulations again.
Thanks.
All right, let's dive into the topic today, which again is the goal for this conversation. What Justin and I hope you guys take away from today's conversation is what balance is needed, what skill set is needed between technical skills and soft or communication skills. And how do you achieve that balance? How do you work to develop those skills in parallel throughout your career? Stats is always seen as a more technical field. So let's start with the technical side of things. Justin, would love to hear about what type of technical skills you use on a daily basis in your career as a biostatistics consultant. Please feel free to share anything and everything about the technical skills you use on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So I think it's very important to learn how to manipulate data. It's going to start there in most cases, especially when I'm working like as a consultant. I'm solo, right? So I kind of manage the whole process. I think manipulating data through coding, especially, I think personally I love R. That's the software language I use. But I think any statistical software tool, even if there's coding or not, I think it's important to master at least one. Really go deep into it. Really take the time to read the software documentation. It's not always pleasant, but it's very useful if you want to develop your technical chops and understand, okay, when I run this procedure, what's going on behind it, right? And then to understand what's going on behind it, then there's all the stats stuff, right? So one thing I would say is obviously there's a certain foundational element of hypothesis testing and all that stuff that's really important. Learning when and why to apply different tests, when the tests are valid, when are they kind of in a gray zone, we're not sure, all that stuff. And I think it's important for the technical side to not feel overwhelmed. I think it's a very, very large domain, and even as a statistician, it's almost impossible to be a master of everything, right? So I think it's important just to start somewhere. And if you're really interested, just follow your curiosity and read some books, find some online courses, find some resources, ideally find some projects, and that's how you can get technical. It's really by doing hands-on work and taking a small bite at a time. We can't do everything in one go. And then obviously what I would like to hear you talk about is how you navigate the communication aspect. So I know you work in a large industry, a large company, which is a bit different than what I do. So how do you deal with having a team, having different stakeholders and stuff like that?
Great question. And before I dive into that, Justin, I do want to highlight some things that you touched on with your answer, because I think your answer was incredibly thorough. But the key thing that I took away from your response was dive deep, right? That the technical skills require a thorough understanding. I love the example you gave about the programming documentation. Like going deep, that level of deep, it sounds like it's tough because it takes time and effort to do that. But at the end of the day, if you have that knowledge, if you understand what's actually going on behind the procedural statement you're writing, either in SAS or R or Python, you have that much more confidence when it comes time to communicate those results. So the technical skills that you're mentioning, I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. I couldn't agree with you more in terms of dive deep, take the time. It might stink to begin with because it's just, okay, I'm spending hours reading through this documentation. And really, as you go through, ask yourself the questions. Do I understand this thoroughly? Can I explain this to someone else? That's always a good test. Can I comprehend this in such a way that I can then regurgitate it to somebody else and say, hey, this is what this actually is doing. This is what this actually means. I think that's a great way to boost your technical skills. Love to hear you say that.
Yeah, and if I may add, like I think exactly explaining and working with other people, so talking through problems, or even like the content we do, right? It's kind of a way to sharpen our sword, to just, okay, can I explain this in a clear and concise way? Especially on social media, it has to be impactful and very that boiled down to the essentials. And I think to clearly communicate that, you need to have a solid foundation. You need to really understand to bring out really the essentials for um, for new people like that you want to explain something to someone who doesn't know anything about it. Well, really need to boil it down and understand it thoroughly. So I think the exercise of packaging your explanations, talking through stuff, writing stuff, I think that's also a great way to learn.
Yes, sharpening your sword. I love the way you put it. Sharpening your axe, making sure that you can be consistent with your explanations is great.
Yeah.
Okay. Communication skills.
Yeah.
Critical piece to this, right? Technical skills will only get us so far if we're able to run the statistical tests. That's great, but communicating those results and also determining which results we actually need to present are half the battle. And so the biggest thing that I've seen in my career that makes or breaks a strong statistician is most of the time the statistician has the technical background. They've achieved a degree, advanced degree. They have some knowledge of how statistics works. It's more of can you listen to the customer or to your team to understand the bigger picture? Not necessarily just the next step or not just necessarily the next item that has to be delivered, but more along the lines of what is actually trying to be achieved here? What is the goal of this? And it's those statisticians that are able to have that discussion with the stakeholder, be it a customer, be it a client, be it a team member or an executive member of your board, whatever the case may be. It's those statisticians that know how to do that really begin to excel and grow their careers rapidly. And so how do you develop these skills? How do you develop these communication skills? The ability to listen and to determine what the bigger picture is. I think the best way to do it, my recommendation, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Justin, but my recommendation is to always start with just listening. Simply understand, or simply just sit back and listen. Do not think about what your response is going to be, because then you've biased to use a statistical term, you've biased the information as it comes into you because you're already thinking about, I'm going to respond this way. And that means that you're throwing out essentially all of the new information that's coming in. So do not do that. Do not think about what your response is going to be. Instead, sit there patiently, calmly, and listen to all of the words being stated to you, either by your team or the customer. And then once they're done speaking, my favorite line, the easiest way to develop your ability to determine what the customer actually wants or what your team actually wants is to use the following line, the following phrase, which is, let me test my understanding. Let me repeat back to you, customer or team, what I've just heard in my own words. And then you tell me if I've heard you correctly or not. And if you do this enough times, enough repetitions, you'll find that you won't even need to do that anymore, because you'll have developed the skill set of, I am actively listening, I understand what the person is trying to communicate, and now most of the time my interpretation of what they've said is accurate. And from there, the fun really begins. Once you've confirmed that your understanding is correct, then you can use those technical skills of what can statistics really do? What kind of inferential analysis can I take from this and put forward to the actual result, the actual thing that I'm trying to create. So the soft skills, to kind of summarize all of that, the soft skills that I think are the most critical are the ability to listen, and then the ability to extrapolate what the big picture is, and then do your work in accordance with what the big picture is. And to develop those skills, just practice, listen, and then say, I would like to test my understanding. Have I heard you correctly? Justin, your thoughts on that? Do you agree with what I'm saying? And if so, how would you recommend developing those soft skills?
Yeah. No, I agree. It's very important to listen. It's very important to also try to understand the underlying motives of the people you're communicating with, right? So, if it's if it's a colleague, a close colleague, the person might have the same goals as you for their career, but if it's a person in another team, well, they have their own goals, and it's important to understand those dynamics so that you can understand the context of the conversation you're going to have, right? It's also important, I think, to ask questions so that way you can prompt the discussion and gain more information again. So it's about listening, it's about understanding what people want, and then I guess it comes down to practice also, right? So the more you're put into group settings, the more you have to deal with communication in different contexts, the more you'll kind of develop your communication skills. So I'll take an example from my consulting business. So like when I started out, um, most of the people that would reach out, they wouldn't sign a contract with me because the way I was taking the calls, the message I was delivering didn't resonate. So I started working with, I guess we can call it a coach, right? So someone who has experience as a consultant and knows how to have those calls go smoothly, and it's not even about like trying to trick people into buying your services. It's just about meeting them where they are and meeting their needs, and and then they're happy to work with you. But sometimes it's just that initial how can like that initial distance has to be closed by effective communication, and that's not always easy. But I think it comes with practice, and if it's something you want to learn, it's we say it's a soft skill, but it's learned the same way. It's learned through practice. It's learned through curiosity, through research, through understanding the principles behind effective communication. Um,
Brilliant.
so,
Brilliant.
yeah,
I would love to second your statement about ask questions.
yeah,
Absolutely. The only way you get information, the only way you understand more about what the client needs or what your team members need is to ask questions. So I think second only to listening would be ask questions and then listen to the responses of those questions.
exactly.
But developing the skill set of what questions to ask, that's a little bit trickier. And I think that just comes with time. Listen to the questions that other people ask, and then write down, hey, that was a good question they asked. That really facilitated a lot of discussion.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way to continue to practice soft skill development.
Yeah. And I just want to maybe take a second. So, by the way, we see the questions that you guys are posting in the comments, and we'll get to them. I really appreciate the questions. Those are great questions. So, if you have more, keep adding them. And I just wanted to ask you a question, Bob, because I know we talked a few times already, but um, how big is the team that you're working in? Because I think it's maybe something different from what I do, because I'm more one-on-one or in, yeah,
Yes, yes. No, that's a great question. So Proforma is huge.
yeah,
I think last count was over 2,000 people inside the team. Data sciences, so where I sit, is roughly around 50 people. Maybe I think we're over 50 at this point, 55. And we're global. So the key thing here is there's one question that the team always has to be able to ask, and that is who else needs to be involved and who else needs to know this information, which I think is much different from when you're working in a one-on-one type of consultation area. When you're working as a large team, the most common thing, the most common error to make that I've seen in regards to soft skills is to just think that it's only you and that only you are doing that thing. When in reality, it would be helpful if you had someone who manages the data. So you bring a data manager or somebody who can write the report at the end of the statistical analysis. So you bring in a medical writer. So it's always the ability to ask who else needs to know about this and who else should I be working on with this should be one of the first questions you ask whenever you receive a new assignment or whenever you onboard a new customer or a new client. And then that's just the first step. The second step then becomes, okay, I'm going to tell these people about this project or about this work. What is the most succinct and efficient way I can communicate the project needs to my team members so that way their work is accurate? Because it turns out that really what business is, what doing work as part of a larger company is, it's really a big game of telephone. I don't know if you ever played that game as a child where somebody picks some random thing to say, like, let's go get ice cream after school today. And then you start saying that to a bunch of people. And by the time it makes it around the room of 30 people, it gets back to you. It has nothing to do with what you originally said. It turns out business is exactly like that, where, okay, I've told my data manager what I need, I've told my medical writer what I need. They might have heard something very different. So it's up to you as the communicator of the information to do it as succinctly, so as shortly, and as efficiently and effectively as possible. So that way there's very minimal noise in the signal that you're sharing with the team.
yeah.
Do you ever stumble across something like that in your one-on-one consultancies with your customers or with any other vendors you might be working with? Do you see that issue arise?
Yeah, so um, yeah, I think it happens sometimes. There's miscommunication. I think that's part of the game, and it's always a challenge because we all come from different walks of life, right? So we have our biases and assumptions that kind of color our conversations, and sometimes we're kind of speaking in two different color tones, and we think we're saying the same thing, but we're not. And I really liked what you said about who should be working on this. How can I integrate people that are going to elevate the team and the project? So I work solo, but I'm surrounded by a team of people I work with. So they're not my employees, they're not part of my business. But like I said earlier, I worked with a coach for one on one calls with my clients. I work with obviously a lawyer. I work with people that help me with marketing. So I'm kind of also always asking, is there someone better than me that can come in and help me? Right. So there's always an opportunity cost of, okay, I'm a statistician, I have to run my business, but if I'm doing something inefficiently where I can be using my expertise in doing more stats work or doing more LinkedIn content and stuff like that, I think it's really important to put the ego aside and get people on board, get people that believe in you, believe in your the success of your projects, if that's inside a company or whatever. I think working in teams is another part of developing soft skills. It's finding a way to fit people into the team, or even yourself to fit yourself into teams where and leverage each people's own unique expertise to make the project go even further.
Agreed. Agreed. It's it's a great note that even when you are your own independent consultant, you still have to work with a team. That we are humans, right? We work better as a unit, as a group. So brilliant addition there. Wanted to take the conversation back to the technical side a little bit, Justin.
Yeah.
What technical skills specifically, is it the ability to calculate a sample size? Is it the ability to select a statistical test? What technical skills would you say would be most important to have as someone who's just getting started in their biostatistics career? Like, where would you really focus your attention, focus your time on making sure that you are super sharp in that technical field, in that technical area?
Yeah. So I think I would go probably with two or three things. So software, like I said earlier, I think you're not going to do your stats on pencil and paper. So you're going to have to figure out what software is worth developing. That's not always easy, but you need to develop proficiency in at least one of those areas. Then I think you should really master the idea around a hypothesis test, right? So, what's a hypothesis test? What are the main ones, right? So we start by learning like t-tests and ANOVAs and the f-tests, the omnibus f-tests and stuff like that. Those fundamentals, even if they're kind of basic, they always come back. So even when you get into advanced stuff, you're often going to end somewhere down the line by doing a hypothesis test. So I think that's really important as a statistician. And the example you took of calculating a sample size, well, that's all based on the theory around the hypothesis test. So I think that's it's kind of like it'll never be time wasted to learn more about the whole mechanics of taking data to test hypotheses. And then the next level, I think, is really especially on the kind of stuff I work on, is to get really good at doing regression models. So building different kinds of regression models. It could be linear logistic regression, which are usually the first ones we learn, and that can do a lot of the work. But then trying to learn about more advanced stuff, generalized linear models, stuff like that, and really understanding, okay, what is a regression model trying to do, and what are the kind of analyses I can do once I've decided that I'm going to take a regression modeling approach. So I think those three things, so software, understanding hypothesis testing, and understanding regression modeling, will get you kind of like it's like the 20% that'll get you 80% return, right? It's like you'll get far if you master those things.
Brilliant, brilliant. Do you have I love the step-by-step nature, right? Like you're very clearly breaking it out. Like, let's just start basic. We don't need to get too advanced. Then slowly we ramp it up. Then we get to linear regression, non-linear regression, things like that.
Exactly.
Do you have any examples for us? Obviously, not talking about any therapeutic areas or any specific products, but do you have any examples for us of a technical item you've recently completed, and to give kind of some flavor to the audience of what it's like to actually work on these things technically?
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of my projects end up with a regression model somewhere, but like let's take an interesting one that's kind of don't see all the time. But so there was this study done in Montreal about how COVID was. So basically, it's an epidemiological study on COVID in the HIV positive population of Montreal. So there's like these clinics that monitor these people, and they had this large data set, and they were measuring the severity of their COVID infection when they were positive. So it was either asymptomatic all the way to putting on mechanical breather or even death, right? So this is kind of like a variable that we say is ordinal. So it has orders in the categories, And it turned out they wanted to understand like how different factors related to that severity of the COVID infection. So I did like a regression model, but here, and I spoke about this on LinkedIn quite a few times, but it's important that we respect the ordinal nature of the data. So the fact that we can go from mild to severe by categories, well, we need to model that appropriately. So there's regression models for everything. We just need to find the right ones. And I was able to understand and deliver some model coefficients with like the tests on the model coefficients, and that helped them understand like how this COVID severity was associated with different risk factors, and that kind of informs them about further studies they can do. And it was like important information for the HIV medical community in Montreal.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's a great example. I love the specificity you got there. Thank you very much for that. The one item I would love to add to that I think really shines through in that example is statistics is so much more than just the math that goes into it, right? Like you had to think about the order of the severity. This is a very simple item, but you had to kind of come up with or have agreement with the City of Montreal as to what the order of those categories were. And that's just one very simple example. But as you extrapolate that, you think about bigger questions in terms of, does my sample actually represent the population? Was it a random sample or was it just a convenient sample? And if so, what do I have to do about that? That the point I'm trying to make here is that the technical skills, you absolutely have to know how to run a linear regression or any type of regression and then test those coefficients in the model and test them out, whatever. But even more so, you have to think about the actual sample that you've taken and how it represents the population and any other biases that might come into play. For example, something we see very commonly in clinical trials is questionnaire data. How those questions are asked could be biasing. They could lead. You could find some tendency towards specific answers based on how those questions are asked. And so that's why we typically only use validated questionnaires whenever we're submitting something to the FDA. And by validated, I mean they've gone through rigorous testing. The FDA has agreed to the use of them. But that's just one example of how broad the statistician has to think when it comes time to actually run the regression model or actually run the statistical test. It's not enough to just take the data, point the test at the data, and say, here's your p-value. That's how you get in trouble. That's how you find, false positives or false results. You agree with that, or am I?
No, I totally agree, and I think that's kind of like a misconception sometimes we have of like. Sometimes I kind of feel like people, they see me as someone that'll just like pump out p-values, and like that can be fine. Some things are maybe very straightforward, and that's what the project requires. But I kind of think of statisticians as like full-fledged scientists. I think you have to think scientifically and critically. You're not a mathematician. Like a lot of my friends are mathematicians, and it's completely different. We're really working with real life problems. So sometimes you can't do what's scientifically perfect or what's statistically exact. You kind of have to meet the project where it's at and kind of juggle all these considerations. And it's very, very fascinating. There's like so many angles to think of. There's so many ways we can address the problem, and usually it's by working together with different experts. So like in my case, it was epidemiology experts that were helping me on the study and stuff like that. So
brilliant. And I do want to address just one thing that I've seen. We will get to all the questions in the chat, absolutely. But I see one from Alex Z. That's not a question, it's a statement, but I want to just boost it because it is absolutely spot on. Have a statistician on board from the get-go. My goodness, if there was one piece of advice I could give to every customer I've ever worked with over my 15 years of experience. It is exactly that. It is, statisticians are not just reserved for the end when it's time to crunch the numbers. That is the furthest thing from the truth. The statistician has to be involved from the beginning when you are determining what your endpoints should be, what your sample size needs to be. You have to have the statistician on board, not just for the determination of the statistical test, but as Justin was just saying, to think about where science meets math, because that's what statistics is at the end of the day.
Exactly.
So Alex, thanks for putting that forward.
Yeah, and I maybe just bounce off of that idea. I've seen it. Sometimes it's really unfortunate. Like some people come up to me with this nice study. They've collected data. They've worked really hard, and there's like these little things we could have changed initially that would have given them even better results, but it's kind of too late. So we kind of deal with what we have, and I think it's always better to have the statistician on board early. So I have some projects where I've been involved in the early stages, and usually it's much smoother process when we get to the analysis.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, in terms of the soft skills and where they come into play in this discussion, it really, I think the next thing, so I've spoken quickly about listening, active listening, and being able to test your understanding. Then Justin added the ability to question, so always be asking questions. I think the third item then that I would add to the critical soft skills is just being, and sorry, I forgot, Justin also brought up the point of communication across the team. That's also another critical soft skill, is the ability to disseminate information clearly, cleanly. The fourth thing I would add then is the ability to see the process through for its entirety, right? Like if you're too minute with your vision and you're too specific on all I have to do today is the sample size analysis, and then you're not thinking about what that means for the future steps in your process, what that means for the actual study or the actual conduct of your work, you might paint yourself into a corner. And so having the foresight of the entire process is the critical soft skill to have. And the best way to develop this is to work backwards. Always use that first soft skill of determining what the larger goal is by active listening, and then work backwards from that larger goal. Okay, this company that I'm working for is trying to prove that their new drug is safe and effective. Endpoints do they have to be able to show, to be able to analyze, and what results do they have to be able to put forward to the FDA for the FDA to make that determination? Okay, how do I conduct those analyses? What data do I have to collect? Okay, how do I work with my data manager to collect that data? So just always start at the end and then work yourself backwards. Ask those questions that Justin was talking about to work your way back towards, okay, I'm at the start. It kind of is like, I keep using analogies from childhood, but I think they make a lot of sense. When you would go to like the pizza place down the road and they would have the kids menu, and on the back of the kids menu there was a maze. And I would never do the maze right. I would always start at the end because it was so much easier to solve the maze. That it turns out that's true in real life. Like the ability to do a maze is so much easier if you start at the end. Clinical trials, life sciences research, same way. Start at the end, work your way back towards the beginning, and then you have a beautiful path laid out of what you need to do. Does that resonate with you, Justin? You see that in your projects frequently?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think it goes back to understanding the motives, right? It's like, okay, there's this big project. What's it trying to accomplish, and how are people incentivized in different ways during the project? And understanding all of that will help you kind of find your place and really expand and kind of deliver value in the whole grand project. I don't know if what you would think, Bobby, but there's a lot of good questions, and we're kind of going on like 15 minutes, so I would like to have time to get through all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah, take it away. Whichever question you want to answer first.
Yeah, well, I'll try to go in order, and I think we'll need some of your insights also.
You got it.
So there was a question by Deepan. As a recruiter, what you value more for a fresher with a master's degree: technical skills or theoretical knowledge? Do you want to
Yeah, I can
take
take a
that one?
stab at this
Yeah.
for sure. So again, I serve as the vice president of biostatistics and statistical programming for ProPharma. So on a daily basis, one of my primary responsibilities is to hire and fill positions when they open up. Um, when looking for a fresh graduate that just has a master's degree, I'm assuming the master's degree is in biostatistics here. I'm actually looking not really for either. I'm more looking for willingness to learn, willingness to grow, and like a team, like attitude, like a team player. We have robust technical exams that we give all of our potential hires, so that's going to come out. Like if you're strong technically or not, that you won't be able to hide that. You'll have to be able to answer. So my assumption is if you have a master's degree, you will be able to pass the technical exam that we give because it is adjusted to the current level of experience. So really, when it comes time to interview for a position, it's much more about those interpersonal skills. Will you be a good fit on the team? Will you show true effort? Will you always do what is right by the client when push comes to shove? It's those things that I look for, assuming that the technical goes well. And the technical is much more based off of practical instead of theoretical. So I do want to answer your question truly, Deepan. Practical skills. Theoretical, that stuff's more for academia. In my mind, I need to know that you can apply the right test to the right type of data, that you know what type of data transformations to do in any given situation, all that stuff. So before the technical exam, it's practical stuff, not theoretical. Justin, anything to add on that?
No, I think I would maybe just add, I agree in like, not to undervalue theory, especially if you're interested.
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
going to help, but
Agreed.
at the end of the day, the being able to apply it is a lot more important, because you're going to work in the business, right? So it has to be applicable. And then maybe move on to Abhishek. How does biostatistics relate to data science in today's era? I'll take
Please.
that one.
Please.
Maybe have a take on that one. So I think it's kind of like data science is kind of like an umbrella term, which is not always used in the same way. So it's kind of maybe hard for people that are navigating the early stages of their career. Should I be a statistician, a data scientist, a biostatistician? What does this all mean? So I think data science could be very statistical. It could be very similar to what I do as a biostatistician. But I also think as a data scientist, you can be maybe doing very analytics focused stuff. So maybe just pulling out how much sales did we do last month, or what's our projected growth, stuff like that. That would also be called data science, I believe. And there would be also everything related to machine learning. Sometimes that's put into data science. So building a recommender algorithm for this big software company or stuff like that. So I think biostatistics kind of falls into data science, and I think that there's maybe a bit wider scope for data science, but I think there's also transferable skills between all these subdomains.
Perfect. Nothing to add. I think just the fact that biostatistics has the term bio in it, so it's a much more specific use case of data analytics, specifically aimed at biological, life sciences, healthcare data. Whereas to Justin's point, data analytics could be sales data, it could be growth, it could be profit margin data, it could be how your ads are doing, whatever the case may be. Biostatistics, much thinner slice of the data analytics pie.
Okay, so next one, Saikat. Having worked as statistical programmer for 2 years, also having BSc and MSc in statistics, what will you recommend me to more focus to have a project or other soft skills you mentioned?
Yeah, so bachelor's and master's in statistics, very good. 2 years of experience in statistical programmer. What would you recommend for me to focus on to have a project? It depends on the projects you'd like to work on, SciCat. I really think that you have great educational credentials. That's not going to be a hindrance. You have great experience. 2 years of experience in the industry is very good. You certainly have a good start. It depends on the type of work you'd like to do. If you want to go into the management track where you're managing other programmers, you're managing statisticians, soft skills. Grow those soft skills, take on a project management position. If you want to be more technical and you want to continue your career in terms of biostatistician, principal level biostatistician, I would find a project that requires a lot more technical. Do some kind of more design work instead of just execution work. So find a company to work for that helps customers design studies, design clinical programs. I think that it depends on what your goals are. But
Yeah.
the world is your oyster. You have great credentials. Those look good.
Yeah. I just like to reinforce the point that you started with, like, it follow what you like, ideally, right? That'll get you much further. What piques your curiosity, just try to get close to that. Great question. And next, Alex, how do you handle contracts, legal, data privacy, etc., as an independent consultant? So I think this one's for me. um, it's not very complicated. I take out my wallet and I pay a lawyer, right? So everything that's legal, I prefer to pay someone who's good and have things done right. So what I do, and of course, like, it's an investment. It's in early stages, it can seem like a lot of money, but I think it's really worth working with a good lawyer. So what I have is I have a master contract template that's been like worked through with a lawyer. And in that contract, there's a data privacy clause, which is kind of it's just that I'll do my best to make sure there's no data leakage, and then it's, I mean, the clients kind of send me their data, and I just make sure I don't give it to everybody, and I delete it once I'm done with it. So I kind of protect myself with the contract. And sometimes when I work with industry clients, then we need an NDA, which then is like another level of paperwork to protect their competitive advantages and stuff like that. But I think it's really important to work with professionals because, like, for example, in industry contracts, sometimes a company will send you a contract and there might be some things that you don't want to agree to. And it's much better to have a lawyer give you his opinion than trying to understand the legal jargon. So find a good teammate, and that's what I would advise for legal stuff.
Awesome. That's great. Okay, next question comes from Nicholas Ferreira. Hey, Nick, good to see you. How can a new graduate stand out in the field with no experience, having transitioned from another field? What is a good way to get practical experience while obtaining a master's degree? My master's degree in biostatistics was at Washington University in St. Louis, which is a very prominent research facility. And so what we were able to do as future biostatisticians while we got our degrees was to offer our support to those investigators at the hospital. And so we helped them work on their projects. So any evidence, any body of evidence that you can generate while you work towards your master's is going to go the distance. So find some investigator out there who's conducting their own research and offer your services, or even better, go to your administrative office for whichever university you go for your master's program and ask them for help. Say, hey, I really want to get practical experience. Can you hook me up with an investigator so I can help support their analysis? Or do you have any biostatisticians that have graduated through this program that I could help support and learn from throughout the way? But really, the way to stand out once you graduate your master's degree is to, because everybody else is going to have a master's degree in biostats, the way to stand out is to say, I also have this body of evidence. I've also done some work before. Here it is. That'll go the distance there. Anything to add on that, Justin?
I just add that a lot of universities have like a kind of statistical consulting bureau to help researchers
Mhm.
or grad students. So if there's one, reach out to the person that's managing it. Usually it's going to be a statistician. And I'm sure that if you show interest, I think you have a good chance of maybe kind of getting closer to that work and maybe having hands-on experience come out from there.
Brilliant. Okay, also from Nick, beyond the prerequisites that are typical for a master's program, calc, basic stats, linear algebra, what other general topics in mathematics can one focus on prior to being admitted to a master's program in order to prepare for the mathematical rigor required? Probability, I think, is a big one. Probability underlines a lot of statistics, understanding probability, distribution functions. Really recommend a strong probability course to help out there. Justin, what about you?
I think that's pretty much it. Like calculus and linear algebra are useful. Probability, very, very useful. And probability has a lot of calculus and linear algebra kind of, they all mix in together anyways. But I wouldn't be too worried about the
Yeah.
math, especially if you're looking to become an applied statistician. If you want to go in academia as a statistician, then you'll probably need strong analysis background, even maybe some measure theory and stuff like that. But if you're going to the applied side, I wouldn't worry too much. I'd just add probability to the list.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. Next one's from Kasra. Great conversation. Thank you very much, Kasra. I am a master's graduate in statistics with a 1.5 years experience in the manufacturing of vaccines. How can I bridge the technical gap between clinical trials and manufacturing? Okay, so you've done some CMC work. You understand how to do sample selection. That's great. Now you want to get more into the clinical aspect of it. Whatever organization you're currently working for, I would ask them. I would say, hey, I really like what I've been able to do on the manufacturing side in terms of sample selection. Is there any way that I can support the clinical trials team as they work towards executing the new clinical trials? And that's not necessarily to say that you would take on any official role, but just to hang out with them and learn from them in your spare time. I think that that's one way to go about it. The other way would be to, if your company, your current organization is not willing to do that, or if you are looking to transition organizations, there are companies out there who would be willing to take you in as a biostatistician who's working on clinical trials, despite not having clinical trial experience, because you're still in the life sciences field, you're still dealing with life sciences related data, and it's a hop, skip, and a jump away. I myself have done some CMC work as well, in terms of sample selection and things like that. So I think there are plenty of organizations out there where you would be able to make that transition nicely. Anything to add on that, Justin?
No, that's a great answer.
Perfect.
So next one is Emma. Hi, Emma. Totally agree with evaluating the experimental setup and not only spilling numbers and p-values. So going back to a point we were discussing earlier. How do you manage to convince people to follow your advice? I find that the most challenging. I agree. Sometimes, actually, the number of times that I've sent like this detailed, like nuanced analysis and the client answers, can I get a p-value? And I know it's kind of hard as statisticians, but I think what I would recommend is kind of meeting halfway. So getting the p-value they want and the numbers they want, give them your nuanced, complete understanding of the problem, of the experimental setup and all that. And if they kind of don't want to take the nuanced part and just want to run with the p-value, that's kind of out of your hands at that point. But I think it just goes back to communication. Just do your best to explain why the result shouldn't be boiled down to a simple number. But it's not always easy. I think it's a challenge to explain that to non-statisticians sometimes.
Yeah, completely agreed. You said it perfectly. It is such a battle that's fought every day to kind of dispel the magic that is the p-value, and instead to instill this. It's the entire body of evidence. And if you read the FDA, so speaking specifically from clinical trials, which is where I come from, if you read the FDA, they publish their SOPs, their procedures for reviewing applications. You can see that they're not just looking at p-values. Sure, that's a part of it, but they're looking through the data sets. They're looking through every single body of evidence that you can generate to show that that drug or device or product is safe and effective. And I think if you can ever offer like real examples or proof like that, it goes the distance. So it's one thing for them to hear it from you. It's another thing if you can point to something and say, look at this publication that came out and they had a significant p-value, but they still they concluded something different. And it's because they looked at these other things. If you can find something like that to help prove your point, and then you can just, the nice thing is once you find that thing, you can just keep going back and back to it to always say to whoever client you're working with, look, this is why we don't just use p-values. This is why we do confidence intervals and entire bodies of evidence.
Nice. So then, Prosper, what is the most important software between Python and R that can be used to do data analysis and stats? So for the basics, I think it doesn't really matter. But once you get into more intermediate or advanced level stats, a lot of the packages won't be available in Python. They will only be available in R. So I think R is definitely ahead for statistics and advanced statistics, advanced biostatistics in particular.
Completely agree. And with that, Justin and I do have to end the stream here, but we understand there are questions that have been left unanswered. We have those in the event description page. We will be able to go in and comment with our responses to those questions following the stream. So if your question didn't get answered, we apologize, but we will answer it. So please go back to that page later today or tomorrow, later the week. Justin and I, one of us, will have responded to your question because these questions were excellent. Thank you for submitting them. And thank you for your time. And Justin, thank you for your time as well. I thought this was a great conversation.
Well, thanks for initiating this, Bobby. And thanks to everybody that listened. I hope it was valuable. And I'm really, really glad that you guys asked questions. They exceeded my expectations. Great conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you, Justin. We'll talk soon.
Everybody. Bye.
Bye.